Right, Kirsty, thanks for joining us.
No worries.
So,
No worries.
Kendal Mountain Festival is coming up, and Called to the
Yeah.
Mountain, which is very much a film about you and your life, is going
Yeah.
to be featured at the Women in Adventure session.
Mhm.
Now, given that you're not going to be there, I thought it'd be really nice for us to catch up in person. And so, as a summary of the film, and I found this
Yeah.
quite difficult to summarize because there's a lot within its 8 minutes or thereabouts, I think.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so it covers a wide range of topics, including, female participation within the outdoors, barriers that exist, kit that doesn't exist,
Yeah.
matters of race, heritage, mountain rescue, mountaineering instructing, gardening, knitting, all of the big questions in society.
Yeah.
However, where to start this logical point seems, how did you personally get into climbing in the outdoors?
So it was about 9 years ago now, I think. I kind of got into my first winter. So I was working as an apprentice for an outdoor company. So I was an apprentice outdoor instructor, and the senior instructor that was there at the time, Gordon, he was really, really keen on winter mountaineering. So myself and the other apprentice that was there, Emma, basically we just ended up going out lots over that winter. And then I think probably the next 3 years, the next 2 or 3 as well. So my first kind of 3 years were all winter based, doing kind of easy winter gullies and ridges and mountaineering days, before I actually got into rock climbing, which was 6 years ago, I think.
I mean, that's such a traditional and such a Scottish way to get into it, isn't it?
Yeah, totally. I mean, you're guaranteed to get better winter conditions than summer conditions, so you may as well just make the most of it.
And one of the things that we talked about when we caught up on the phone the other day was just, a lot of people are coming into the climbing side of things via indoor walls, and I mean, one of the topics covered within the film is, diversity within the outdoors and kind of the lack of it. Now, at the indoor spectrum side of the climbing spectrum, that's probably the more diverse end of the spectrum. It's probably quite ironic that you came in at the least diverse end of the spectrum, albeit representing someone who, comes from your mother's, Indian, and you have a non-white background.
It is just a strange way. It didn't feel strange at the time, but looking back on it and kind of chatting to the majority of my climbing partners now and friends, it's a strange way to get into things. But it was good. It meant by the time I got around to rock climbing, like I was really happy with the rope work. I was happy, like hanging around at a belay, obviously, because we do a lot of that in winter, and stuff like that. So
now, one of the things that's come up on our forums and elsewhere online is, this talk of the barriers that exist. And I think, I mean, obviously from the perspective of a white male, there are very few barriers for me to do anything, probably because I'm massively overconfident and I believe that I can just go anywhere and do anything. Now, I think therefore some people, probably particularly within my group, as it were, find it difficult to imagine these barriers existing because maybe they're not, physical walls erected around Scotland, or at least maybe not yet. And so, what would you say about the barriers that exist, maybe within the various stages of climbing? So maybe starting with winter climbing, perhaps.
Well, I guess for winter climbing, it's probably that an alpine climbing would be considered the kind of pinnacle almost, in terms of it needs the widest range of skills. So there's a lot you need to have done up to that. So if there's been barriers right along your kind of journey to winter, whether that's going from an indoor wall to outdoors, looking at trad climbing, and then actually getting to winter climbing, if there's been barriers at each stage of that, then it's just hard for folk to get into it.
I guess it's that question of role models as well, isn't it? Because if, for instance, I mean, you know, I got into climbing at university, which is obviously, you know, from particular socio-economic background, through a university mountaineering club and society. Loads of people look like me, were like me there, climbing and mountaineering. So it sort of felt like a very natural course for me. But for someone who does not come from that background, or looks different to me, or isn't male, for instance, you may look at other people and actually see very little in common and just go elsewhere.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, like, obviously there'll always be people who, no matter kind of what representation, if they're really keen on something, they'll give it a go. But you're far more likely to give something a go or get into it if there are people you can relate to that are already doing it, and that you can see it's just going to make things feel a bit more welcoming and feel like it's somewhere that you can belong.
So moving smoothly on, almost as if we planned it, you know, you are mountain leader, you know, mountaineering instruction. Was that one of the motivating factors for you to get involved within that side of things, to again inspire the next generation, or differing people into the outdoors?
Yeah, I think being a mountaineering instructor it's kind of something I've wanted to do for a long time now, and kind of the further along I've gone, the more I've realized the influence you can have. You know, you're the first point of contact for folk wanting to get into the outdoors, or you can be. You know, mountaineering instructors are also, you're likely to be in contact with at least one, if not several, if you're doing the awards yourself. So I think there's a really important role for mountaineering instructors to play in making this sport completely inclusive. And yeah, at the moment, the mountaineering instructors in the UK are 10%, I think actually 9% female, and I don't think there's figures on race. So there is obviously quite a bit of work that needs doing there as well, but there's things kind of wheels turning to get things started in there.
We obviously have done a lot of work with Rachel Crewsmith on site, who's one of my personal rock climbing superstars. And you know, gender to one side, Rachel is undoubtedly one of the people I would most like to go out on the hill with, full stop, ever. And yet she does have something that I guess, like, you know, an appeal, for instance, to a female audience that, well, I certainly don't anyway. But also she's just way more fun and got so much more charisma, at least on camera, as far as UKC's concerned. Well, she's just been amazing to deal with. And it does break things up. The reason why we got Rachel along to do some of our trade show coverage is keys in with something, again, you talk about, to do with the kit that's available. Because, you know, getting top-end women's mountaineering kit for, say, Scottish winter, you know, it's getting better, but historically it's been really difficult. So do you want to tell us a bit more about that and your experiences?
Yeah, I think it is tricky to go into a shop and have the choice of more than one mountaineering boot, or more than one B3 that's actually going to fit, or, you know, more than a couple of jackets that have a helmet compatible hood and big cuffs and decent sized pockets. And I think my struggle is probably hard shell trousers, because I'm pretty short. You know, trying to find somewhere that has a range of women's plus has them in a short leg that you can try on is really tricky. Because I guess most hard shells, they've got zips right the way down, so it's not something you can kind of alter at home, which I end up doing with a lot of my other trousers. So yeah, it's just that little bit harder finding things that fit and that you can actually try on, or you have to buy online and kind of hope for the best a little bit.
Yeah, it's. I mean, again, it goes back onto that matter of the lived experience of knowing how awkward it is to buy a pair of shorter leg women's hard shell over trousers compared to if I walk into a lot of outdoor shops. I'm blessed with probably regular length, short length, long length over trousers, and not just one individual item, but potentially you know, several differing brands to choose from. And I guess it doesn't feel right, I guess, is the best way of wording it in that respect. So you're based in Oban on the west coast of Scotland, and you were also a member of the mountain rescue team there. which again, I mean, I'd imagine that you probably represent a fair minority within the team in that regard, because I'm assuming that Oban isn't the most diverse of areas.
No, it's not. So, definitely in terms of heritage and race, like I'll be the only mixed race person. Definitely in Oban. I think across Scottish Mountain Rescue, across all the teams, it's fairly limited. But to be honest, Oban does pretty well for women members. We've probably got about a third of the team are women, which is a really strong group. And I think it's something that's been kind of managed to ensure it stays as much as possible. Because I know some of our ex-team leader felt it was really important to have that. And it really does like change the feel of the team, I think, in a totally positive way.
It brings different perspectives, doesn't it? Which is ultimately going to only benefit the team and the general vibe of the rescue team as a whole.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Sorry, I was just going to.
It's all right. I was going to say as well, what inspired you to get involved with the rescue team as well? Because obviously it's an investment in your time as well.
So I've been in the team now for 7 years. And it originally started, the team leader then I knew quite well, and they were having a bit of a recruitment drive. And he just asked if I'd be interested. So I think, had he not asked, I'm not sure I would have gone for it, because I probably would have thought I wasn't ready for it at all. But I went along, and like been in the team ever since. So I'm now one of the shout managers, and I'm the very recently promoted training officer. We just had a wee switch around last week. So yeah.
There is something, isn't there, I think, about, I've been a member, I was previously a member of the Llanberis Mountain Rescue Team, albeit for a very short period of time. But I guess, like, again, that thing of like my confidence, my male confidence, a stereotypical sweeping generalization here, but of male confidence means that I think that I'm going to be right to be a part of that. I'm ready, even though I may be hideously ill-equipped. Whereas actually, from what you're describing, you're perfectly competent, capable, but for some reason didn't feel, is it imposter syndrome or not feeling like quite right or something like that?
I think so. I think it's kind of a mix of those. And I think you see it a lot more in women, is women will tend not to go for things unless they're like 100% sure they can do the job. Whereas, like, obviously generalizations here, but guys tend to, if they can do like 50 to 60%, they're like, oh yeah, perfect.
I'm the person you're describing, Kirsty.
Yeah.
But I think that's a major point. You were saying that you were asked by the team leader. This is where anybody can be a part of the solution rather than part of the problem, by being like really proactive in seeking out, young people as a whole. Could be male, could be female, could be black, could be white, come from another ethnic, background. But it's trying to be a part of the solution rather than a part of the problem. And on the note of part of the solution, our Shared Outdoors, which is your initiative. Do you want to tell us a bit about that?
So our Shared Outdoors is an organisation I'm setting up with a wee team as well. So the kind of idea behind it is we're looking at ways to kind of tackle the lack of diversity in the outdoors. And something that was really important to us was that it was intersectional as possible. So we're not just looking at one aspect. We're looking at gender equality, racial equality, looking at ways we can include more LGBTQ plus folk, disabled folk, plus size, just kind of all the groups of people we don't normally see or hear much about, even though there's folk out there doing it. So we've got a few work streams that we're planning to do this through, and we're getting started at the moment. It's still early days, but on our social media we've been putting together some resources and highlighting bits and pieces while we kind of get started.
I think one of the things you said the other day was about bringing all of these voices together, because lots of good work takes place out there. It's just that some people might not know about it, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. That's definitely one of the things we're quite keen to do is just, yeah, as you said, kind of bring all these voices together, because there is a need for change, but if it's small individual groups asking for it, it does work. But I think if we can kind of get everyone together, then we're going to be a bit better regarded by the kind of, whether it's brands or festivals or whatever.
My perspective as well, and I say this as somebody who needs educating, in themselves, is just talking about these issues. Like, I think, again, something that, of my parents' generation, it could have been things, like homosexuality was outlawed at the time.
Yeah.
It was illegal. So, whereas for our generation now, it's another norm, I would hope, anyway.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that life is easier, but it is like accepted, I think, by a lot of people of our generation, or far more accepted than it was the generation before us. So for the generation to come, I think it's a case of just keeping the conversation and education up. The more we know and the more familiar it is, the less, well, I guess it's the unknowns and the question marks that tend to freak people out a lot of the time.
Yeah, and I think for us it's just something we want to kind of normalize a lot more, because I know one of the major comments you kind of see a lot, whether it's on climbing forums or online or social media or whatever, is that climbing is something that politics shouldn't be involved. They shouldn't be mixed. Climbing is where people go to escape. But for the majority of these kind of groups of people who are underrepresented, or it's not an option for them. Politics follows them wherever they go. It's part of their life in whatever space they are. So I guess just kind of making that point, I think, is pretty major, because a lot of the time for folk it does feel like they feel like it's like, oh, I escape to not think about this. But just realizing that not everyone can do that.
I think, again, from my perspective, from the white male perspective, it's very easy to stick your head into the sand because life's pretty straightforward. The other thing about climbing and politics is that the two ultimately do go hand in hand, whether we like it or not. Using the environment as another example is critical, because by lobbying for better environmental policy within government, we're ultimately trying to protect the outdoors. Going back onto Scottish winter, it's 12, 13, 14 degrees out at the moment.
It's really warm.
It's November, and I think if we stick our head in the sand about this and other issues, and try to claim that climbing exists within this perfect political bubble, well, we're screwed, aren't we?
Yeah, absolutely. It's got such a historical kind of link to it as well, with regarding access, specifically, I guess, in England and Wales. Obviously, we've got a bit more. Oh, it's a bit different up here. But yeah, so it is linked. Like, everything is linked. And I guess the other thing for me is that claiming it's politics is quite a privileged statement when you're talking about kind of someone's basic human rights.
It's very easy to say that and shut down the conversation, isn't it? Which again goes back to what we were talking about actually keeping the conversation going, and therefore trying educate people as to the issues. And if you do shoot someone just sounds, then sorry, mate, no climbing, no politics. Then you're just ultimately saying, sorry, Kirsty, this has been a great chat, but you're wrong.
Exactly. So yeah, I guess that's kind of some of the attitudes we want to tackle a wee bit with our Shared Outdoors, because I think in a lot of the time people aren't necessarily going out of their way to say these things. They might not realize what kind of the messages they're sending by saying them, So yeah, just a wee bit of education that we're kind of pulling together resources and that kind of thing. So yeah, there's a lot of that up on the page at the moment.
Well, it'd be great to hear more about your work in the future, but thanks ever so much for joining us today. And I'm sure that the film will be well received at Kendal. But yeah, look forward to catching up soon.
Yeah, ace. Thanks very much, Rob.